Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me today. As you can see, I am alone today. I'm flying solo. There is no Linda around today as she is still poorly. If you've listened to the show over the last couple of weeks, you've known that her voice has had a few issues. Anyway, I think they've got to the bottom of that now, and she'll be back next week. So, as you can imagine, today's show may be quite short. And if it is, what I've done is, if you haven't seen the work that I do before, which is basically around table tipping, after the closing titles of the show today, I've put my table tipping session on at the end as a little bonus, if you like. It does go up on YouTube every week, and I will put it up later today. However, I think under the circumstances, in order just to keep the show a little bit more in line with what we do, I'll put it up there today. And if you don't know my YouTube channel, it is Medium Mike Cavalli. That's all you've got to look for. And then you will see all the shows that we've done here with Linda. And you'll see the link to my table tipping page on YouTube. So, without further delay, let's get on with the show. I'm just going to run through exactly what we've got lined up today. Our first story is naturally to do with the more darker stuff, and it's the paranormal experiences. And we've got another poltergeist story going on here. And last week we spoke about does a poltergeist cross the line when it starts throwing things around, i.e. like knives and spoons and forks and things like this. And if that's the case, is it then acceptable for guides and the peacekeepers on the other side to step in and stop this poltergeist without us asking for help? The other issue we have with this is, if this is this person who's living in the house with the poltergeist, one of their life contracts to experience this frightening event, in which case then can the light workers and guides interfere? I would suggest that they can do a certain amount, but please leave your comments about this and all the other subjects we're going to talk about today. If you do leave a comment and you're not watching it from YouTube, then I won't be able to answer you. Unfortunately, that's the limitation of the system at the moment. So we're going to look at Melissa's pre-birth story and all other little spiritual experiences that she had. And this can be quite heartwarming to people as more and more people, as our awareness becomes greater and we step more into the 5D alignment of infinite possibilities. A lot of people now are beginning to remember their pre-birth existence and all the other spiritual experiences that they've acquired and forgotten about as they've grown older because of the stress and the worry of the day that we all go through. So we're going to be looking at Melissa's story. We're going to look at Isaiah, and this is the second chance of life that he was given, and his miracle cure had to be by divine intervention, I would suggest, in this case. And this is a subject that really rings home to me because I know somebody who's going through this right now, and they actually said that she should have made the transition some 2 years ago. But here she is, still with a lot of bodily imbalances. And once again, they have said, oh, you're approaching the end, blah, 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 blah. Here she is, still fighting through. So we're going to have a look at that story. We're going to have a look at June Thompson's NDE, another beautiful NDE story. I'm not sure why people, when they have these near-death experiences, well, I am sure actually why they have these hellish experiences when they have an NDE, but the vast majority of people don't have hellish experiences, and they have these hellish experiences because of their consciousness. But here's another beautiful NDE that we're going to look at. And like I said, if the show is a little bit short, which I've got a feeling it will be, after the closing titles, I'm going to put up my table tipping session, and then that goes on my YouTube page independently. So, okay, let's start off. Let's take a look at some paranormal activity.
The thought of having a poltergeist in your home is terrifying. Although it's said that poltergeists aren't always violent, these spirits can still supposedly torment their victims by making noises and moving objects. YouTuber Sylvia C began noticing strange occurrences in her home after playing with a Ouija board at her kitchen table. She claims that her channel documents some of the activity that has since occurred. In this clip, it's fairly obvious that whatever is present wants to make itself known.
I'll just put the camera on. There's quite a bit of activity tonight in the kitchen.
Keep an eye on the cupboard door. It swings open, then shuts. Next, watch what happens when the woman asks, "Do you want me out of your house?"
Do you want me out of this house, or do you want me to stay?
The presence appears to answer by moving a can on the kitchen counter. The poster explains that this kind of thing happens in her kitchen all the time. This is evidenced in the next clip, which shows the poster hiding behind a partition while pointing the camera towards the sink.
Oh my god, that spoon's moving. Oh my god, did you see that? Oh my... Oh, that knife's moving now.
You can see a spoon and fork moving by themselves.
Oh my god, that spoon's moving. Oh my god, did you see that? Oh my... Oh, that knife's moving now.
This is when things start to get a little creepy. A piece of glass slides off the counter and shatters on the floor. Then the entire room starts to rumble and shake, tossing other objects around. It doesn't appear to be an earthquake because it doesn't affect the rest of the house. Next, the investigator uses a device in an attempt to contact any resident spirits. Eerily, he receives a message telling him to open the basement. Bravely, or perhaps stupidly, he decides to do it. He opens the hatch and ventures cautiously into the darkness. Suddenly, something catches him off guard. Take a listen. It sounds like an eerie screech. Unwilling to find out who or what made the noise, he wisely leaves the basement. However, it seems that his curiosity soon gets the better of him and he lowers himself through the trapdoor one more time. Sure enough, the same spine-chilling sound emanates out of the darkness.
There we are. So, okay. So I'll give you my thoughts on this straight away. The first one here, well, my impressions were that this was pretty genuine, and she felt pretty scared by this. But what concerns me is the amount of things that are left lying around there, which encourages the poltergeist activity. I would have thought you'd have put as much stuff away as you possibly can in order to not encourage stuff. Yes, I know poltergeist can open a cupboard and throw things out anyway, but you're leaving everything there. And in many ways, you're making it easy for the poltergeist, and you're making it readily available. In many ways, you're inviting it by keeping that stuff out. So I think it would be wise for this lady to put away as much stuff as she possibly can. So as you can see there, the presenter there was saying that the poltergeist is picking up and moving around forks and spoons. But we clearly hear her saying that she said, oh my God, now he's making a knife move. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And so there was the question. Is it okay then, when poltergeists start picking up knives, is that the point where the line has been crossed? And that's the point where guides and light workers can step in and say, nope, you've crossed the line, that's got to stop. So I'm not saying they're going to say to the poltergeist, you've got to leave, but they simply will not allow that to happen. As you can imagine, this is a very complex issue, because there's also the person's life path to take into consideration. Well, did they agree to come to the earth plane and experience a horrific and frightening event like this? And maybe it was not so much her life path, but maybe she had to have this experience for her children who had this life path. There are so many questions that need to be answered before we can say with surety that spirit can intervene or they can't intervene. I guess it's one of those things we'll never know. But I'm pretty sure that in this kind of situation, if you get help to make it stop, it will stop. Because remember, it's an experience that you're having, not a life lesson. And so it doesn't need to go on forever and ever and ever. You've learnt the lesson. It's terrifying, and now it can be stopped. And I think there's much that she could have done. She can get someone in who's experienced in poltergeist or paranormal activity and deal with it to send this spirit out of the place. I guess spirit shares all our homes, but they're not creating poltergeist activity. They're not moving things around. And so I guess that's okay. We're sharing the same space, just on different frequencies. And somehow maybe this poltergeist has managed to home in on their frequency and really quite likes it, because now that she's in the fear energy, this is the energy that the poltergeist needs to have sustenance and survive. So if you cut out the source of food for the poltergeist, then it has to go elsewhere, and that source of food is fear and anxiety and all those lower vibrational stuff. I mean, as for the second clip, yes, I think this is quite a realistic. I don't think this is fake. This guy must be either extremely well protected or extremely stupid, because to go down that hole with all that paranormal activity, it has to be one or the other. Me personally, I wouldn't have gone there. I've done that sort of stuff, and I don't wish to go back to doing that sort of stuff. It was an experience, and that was okay. So, in many ways, I feel that this guy, this paranormal researcher, was being tricked into going down there. And as you see, what he witnessed was this terrifying scream. But what amazed me is that he went back again for a second chance. And that's where I think perhaps he's being naive and being a little bit foolish. I would have put the lid back on there and be gone. And I think most people would. Unless you were looking to try and communicate with that low vibrational frequency, almost demonic actually, and trying to get it to understand what it is that it wants and why it wants to stay in this place. So that's just food for thought. Next week's show, I've got a really interesting video where a man is dragged into the water and a minute later thrown back out, or it appears that he's been thrown back out. Very strange goings on there, and that's quite an interesting thing to look at, and I hope Linda's going to be back in time for next week so that she can actually give her view on this, because she's probably more experienced than me than I am at that type of stuff. So that's the paranormal stuff over with. And I want to say once again, if you have a paranormal experience, if you have got if you've had an NDE, any spiritual experience, you've had a time slip, you've reincarnation experience or a pre-birth spirit experience, please let me know. You can contact me at mikecavalli@hotmail.com or contact Linda through her Facebook page. All you got to do is sit in front of a camera like I'm doing now. It can be your desktop camera on your computer, and just tell your story in no more than 5, 6, maybe 7 minutes. And I'll put the video stuff in after. If you don't want to be seen, then you can tell your story in the form of audio, and I'll again put some video over it to make it a little bit more colourful. Or just send us in your experience, and either myself, Linda, or Katerina, who does the Open Door News, will read that out. But the important thing is that we want to get some real people who've had real experiences, and not so much the people who've got a book to sell. Of course, they'll be welcome as well. But real people with real experiences is what we're looking for. So that's that. Let's move on to our second one. And this is in fact Melissa's pre-birth story and all the other stories that she had associated with her spiritual experience. And pay close attention to her facial features. Look how radiant she is. Look at her eyes, how alive she is. This is an indicator of what she is saying is something she's experienced that is supernatural, because the eyes are the windows to the soul. You can kind of feel that she can still feel the emotion of all these experiences that she's had. So let's take a look at Melissa's pre-birth and other experiences.
Like my eternal father and mother, being nurtured in the womb of your mother and held in the arms of your father at the same time. And I began to see how ridiculous some of the things that I had been taught were, and how impossible that it would be for anybody to ever be lost, because we're so safe and we're so held and loved all the time, even though we can't feel it in these bodies. It was like this ocean or this hurricane of love and light, like this infinite ocean of love that was also this flower of love that was opening and creating, and it was music. And if I could put the music into words, it would be we are love, or I, which includes all that is love, and you are part of this, and we are rejoicing and celebrating our existence. And there was this bliss and joy, don't even begin to come close, but they're the best words that we have. But it was like this this happiness that goes beyond anything that we can imagine, and that is the essence of reality. is the best way that I can put it. Reality is music and joy and love and creation, and this deep sense of security and safety and knowing that everything is not only okay, everything is perfection and beauty and bliss. And so it's just this memory I have of being in this and seeing this and experiencing this. And also the feeling that of desire and satisfaction, like every need you could ever have was satisfied in this light. There's nothing that you could want or need. And that's what I was missing when I came into this life. That's primarily what I felt was the loss of that, and then the memory and the knowing that there was this something out there that I had lost and I couldn't figure out where it had gone. I don't remember all the details of that. I do remember asking for red hair. So I have this like glimpse of a memory that I was working with the divine, or what I later learned to call God, and my guides or my angels, and we were planning aspects of my life. I specifically remember asking for red hair. That's the only detailed memory I have of that, but I also had a spiritually transformative experience when I was about 18, and in that experience I did see that my whole life had been planned. This quickly, at the speed of light, I had expanded enough to encompass everything that there was to know or experience. And I felt like the whole universe was happening inside of me. Now, I reached my most expanded state, and what I saw, that most expanded state, was I saw the key to life. I was not allowed to remember that, unfortunately. And as soon as I saw that, I started to contract back into my head. Now, at the same time that this was happening, I was being shown things, and some of these things I remember very vividly. So the first thing that I remember is I looked down on the earth and I saw that everything in the physical world is made of brilliant light. And the way that I like to describe it is, if you've ever flown in an airplane on a cloudy day, and when you're beneath the clouds, it's dark and dreary, but as soon as you break up through those clouds, it's beautiful and sunny and brilliant. And that's what this reality is like. Being down here in this physical world, it appears to be dark and gloomy, and all the pain and the suffering and everything that we experience feels so real. The only difference is that when you awaken and expand past that, out of this physical world into the spiritual realm, you look down and you see that the storm clouds are an illusion. And I've often wondered why I had such a hard time as a child, because, as I said, a lot of people have had it far worse. And I think a lot of it was just the contrast between what we experience here and what I remembered. And in some ways it's helpful, because it helps me to keep a positive perspective on life, because I know what I'm going back to. I know I planned this. I know I'm not alone. But at the same time, most of the time you can't feel that here. And it can be really difficult. And there are definitely times when I just want to go home. And I think that's normal human. Like, we all know this isn't home. There's part of us that knows this isn't home.
Interesting. So, a very interesting experience there. What I got from this, and we spoke about this, I think, last week in our table tipping sessions, where the question was asked, can we choose our features? Can we choose what we look like? And I think there is an example where she remembers being allowed to choose the colour of her hair, because this opens up lots of other questions. She has a life path that she has accepted to take. Presumably she has chosen to experience all these things and made the contract in her life path. Now, if she chooses the colour of her hair and the colour of her eyes and the shape of her head and the colour of her skin, then somehow Spirit has to arrange for her to meet all those requirements in the body of a mother who can provide her with that path. So if all you're looking for is just red hair, then that's a much easier task for Spirit to give you. But if you're looking for red hair, blue eyes, and I don't know, you want Mediterranean skin, then Spirit has to look obviously a little bit further and a little bit deeper. So there's a lot more to consider when you start asking for this stuff. Many people actually don't care what they look like because that's not the experience they want. And clearly this lady wanted to have the experience of red hair. So again, you know, wow, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked when we do go back home. And as she eloquently put it, you know, and she knows, we all know that this is not home. This is just like a temporary stopover, if you like. The bigger question is, why do we need to learn? Why can't we learn all this stuff in the halls of learning on the other side of life? Big debates. We should perhaps have a big debate about all of this. But anyway, moving on to Isaiah's second chance. This is a story that's really close to my heart. As I mentioned, a friend of mine who doctors said she should have made the transition over 2 years ago is still with us and still experiencing many bodily imbalances. And so what I can say is, if the mind is strong enough, then it can make the changes in the body required in order to heal. And science has proven this. More about that in a minute. Let's look at Isaiah's story and this miraculous outcome of what was believed to be his last days and therefore the transition. A beautiful story.
Sylvia urged her husband to seek a second opinion, and the new doctor confirmed that Isaias was a very sick man. His entire immune system was failing, a result of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a deadly cancer.
I'm sorry to have to tell you this.
I was very worried then. The first thing everybody thinks about with cancer is death. You associate cancer with death immediately.
The odds of beating the disease were slim. Isaias was to begin chemotherapy treatment immediately, but his doctor, George Selby, didn't offer much hope of success. Ultimately, doctors decided that his only hope was a bone marrow transplant. Luckily, his brother Jesus was a perfect match.
The bone marrow match with his brother was a perfect 7-cell to 7-cell. And it's unusual because the doctor had even mentioned that identical twins don't even match up 7 to 7.
On December 22nd, 1993, doctors transplanted bone marrow from his brother into Isaias.
His recovery was wonderful after the bone marrow. 2 days later, he had an appetite. He told all of us, I want some fajitas and I want some beans, pinto beans. We all knew it was just a matter of time before he'd go home.
In the days that followed, Isaias recovered his health in leaps and bounds. Sylvia stayed by his side 24 hours a day, sleeping nearby and never out of calling distance. After 2 weeks, doctors were so upbeat about Isaias' recovery that Sylvia finally felt confident enough to go home for a decent night's sleep.
Why don't you do like the doctor said and go home and get some rest?
Okay. I love you.
Love you too.
They tell me, yeah, go ahead and go home. Doctor said he'll be fine, you know. You don't need to be here. You've been here long enough.
But her sleep was interrupted by an urgent phone call.
At 2:30 in the morning, I got the call from the nurse.
Hello?
I said hello and said, your husband needs you. He's a little sick.
Why?
She goes, oh, he's just asking for you.
I'll be right over.
She wouldn't tell me anything more than that.
When Sylvia arrived at the hospital, she discovered the horrible truth.
We're losing him.
Isaiah's lungs had collapsed and filled with blood. His entire body seemed to be shutting down.
He was dying. The doctor told me Isaiah was alive because of the machine that had just put on him. And he said if I take off the machine right now, he will die. As simple as that, he will be dead.
Isaiah was now totally dependent on life support machines. Once again, Sylvia remained by her husband's side day and night. But as the days passed, Isaiah's condition showed no signs of improvement.
He didn't move. We would touch him and he would feel cold. Every day I prayed, and I just prayed for God to let him see his grandkids, to let him live long enough to see his grandchildren.
Sylvia, there's really nothing left for us to do.
Doctors finally told Sylvia they could do nothing more to help Isaiah. They suggested she discontinue life support.
I'm really sorry, Sylvia.
With no hope left, Sylvia turned to her children for advice. Among them, Emily Cruz.
The doctor says that there's nothing they can do anymore.
We had been talking about what would happen if that decision did come up, and we had all decided that the best thing to do would be to let them pull the plug so that he wouldn't suffer.
With that difficult decision made, doctors began preparations to disconnect Isaiah from life support. But everyone was in for a miraculous surprise. That evening, Sylvia visited her husband one last time.
I kissed him on the forehead, started singing a lullaby to him.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
I just kept singing and singing and singing. I sang for a long time. I was just praying to God, please let him tell me, you can't carry a tune in a bucket, shut up.
How I wonder what you are.
But that didn't happen.
Devastated and broken-hearted, Sylvia remained nearby as hospital technicians prepared to shut off all life support.
When I heard the swoosh of the air when I took off the tube, my heart was in my throat. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to run away, hide, whatever.
Suddenly, there was a commotion behind the curtain as doctors and nurses reacted to the unexpected miracle they were witnessing.
When they pulled the curtains back and I see Isaiah sitting there, I couldn't believe it.
Oh, you're alive.
And I wanted to jump up and scream.
I heard her screaming, and the first thing that went through my mind was that he had died.
He's alive!
And then she comes running in, he's alive. And I thought I'd heard her wrong. I said, there's no way. And she said, no, he's alive. He is.
Let's go! Come on!
He just took off to his room just to make sure that it was true, that she wasn't, pulling a really cruel joke on us. And sure enough, it was true.
Isaiah had defied all expectations. His lungs were fully functioning, as were his heart and mind.
He's alive! Yes, he's alive!
Doctors were amazed by their patient's sudden and remarkable recovery.
I've never seen anybody that was as sick as he was recover to the extent that he has. And I think it really is miraculous that he's done as well as he has.
So, how can it be that someone with collapsed lungs can only live on life support, and then when they turn the life support off, his lungs are working to full capacity? How can this be? Is it misdiagnosis in the first place? Or is it a miracle? I tend to think it's a miracle. I also tend to think that he had a strong desire to live also. And God knows what happens with his consciousness, where he was when he was in that induced coma state, if you like, that vegetative state, they like to put it. What kind of agreement was going on with him and his guides in the other world? because I'm pretty sure that's where his consciousness was. And so the other thing that actually concerns me is this, innocently enough, when the daughter, I think it says, you know, to turn the machine off so he wouldn't suffer. Who's to say that, first of all, he's suffering? This is one of the false beliefs, I think, that they're actually not suffering at all. And so, you know, to say to turn it off to prevent the suffering, perhaps what we're saying is to turn it off so that we don't have to suffer anymore. Because as we can see here from this example and many, many others, you turn that machine off and you might be turning it off prematurely because perhaps, just perhaps, there has been a misdiagnosis. And in this case, perhaps the lungs didn't collapse. Again, many questions, and I think it's important that we get deep into these questions and we start using critical thinking in order to get to the bottom of things and not just simply accept what authorities, in this case doctors and academia, says. Under this situation, under this case, this man can no longer live and he'll be in a vegetative state if he does live, or he has to remain on this life support. I can tell you from my own experiences with my father, it was pretty similar to this, where he was in an induced coma for 6 weeks and they said that he lost a lot of oxygen to the brain. And if he lives, he will be in a very weak state that you'd have to feed him, wash him, comb your hair and do everything. But what they didn't know was that I and a couple of others were doing some healing and making sure that oxygen did get to the brain, especially when he was in the resuscitation unit. The doctors couldn't believe, once they saw the oxygen going down to dangerous level where he could be brain dead, it started to go back up again and they couldn't understand why. Well, we understood why. It was the healing process that allowed this to happen. So we can turn off these machines prematurely. And again, referring to my friend, they would have had her in a box a long time ago, 2 years ago, and she's still defying all the odds. So as long as there is the will, it's my belief that you can continue living, providing it isn't your life contract and that is your time. And clearly with Isaiah, this wasn't his time. So this is an inspirational story for everyone who is experiencing a loved one going through what doctors call a terminal experience. And I would advise to think twice before pulling the plug on a loved one, because it may be too early, it may be too soon. So there we are. Let's move on to our final story, and this is June Thompson's NDE. It's another beautiful story, and I just want to say that as I mentioned in the beginning there, that many people, we hear, not many actually, quite minimal in that respect, have an NDE experience where they have a hellish experience. And the only thing I can think of, well, I know is it's because of their consciousness and their state of mind. And that's where they perhaps need to be, just to learn a little bit more before they go into the higher realms and into the heavenly frequency, as it were. But the vast majority of people, vast majority of people have a beautiful NDE, and they leave their tortured body that's torn and twisted either through an accident or for whatever. They leave their body and they feel no more pain, and they really have expanded awareness, and a lot of them have difficulty coming back. But let's hear June Thompson's NDE story, and then we'll wrap this up.
Right when I knew I couldn't take anymore, I went very internal. I disconnected completely from the external world, from everyone that was around me, from everything that was outside of my body. I thought to myself, I'm dying. This is what it feels like to die. And I wasn't scared. It was just a very matter of fact knowing. And right at that moment, I popped out of my body. I was no longer attached to my body. And the pain was completely gone. I was so detached that I then noticed that I was up on the ceiling of the room that I was in. And I was looking down at the scene below me, and I could see my body lying there on the gurney, but I could see that my essence was no longer a part of that body, that it was just the shell of who I am. And I felt myself very quickly going into the tunnel. I felt like I was on a roller coaster because it was fast and you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it's exhilarating and it was exciting and almost joyful in a sense of, oh, I wonder where this is taking me. And then I was stripped of ego. I was stripped of the limitations of my brain. I was stripped of the limitations of my body. And the light that I was in didn't have any of those limitations either. And so there was enough room for this complete, deep, unconditional, pure love. A lot of the peace that I had once I was in the light was that whatever I had to go through in order to transition out of my body, even though it was a lot of pain, it wasn't even a thought at that point. It was just something that was in the background for me. And so there's a lot of peace in knowing that death isn't the end. Life is just a chapter. And however we do ultimately transition out of our bodies, there's nothing but peace and love that waits for us on the other side. I did not want to go back into my body after that beautiful experience that I was having in the light. That was the only place I wanted to be. I heard the firm but gentle and loving voice say, you need to go back. And I continued to protest and try to get my way and say that I wanted to stay longer. But I knew that it wasn't a negotiation. And yet as I continued to protest, I felt myself get nudged, lovingly nudged back into the tunnel. Very quickly backwards through the tunnel. And then next thing I knew, I was back into my body. I re-entered my body through the top of my head. And then I was fully in my body long enough for me to register that I was back in this world, that I was no longer in that white light. The pain quickly returned, and then I was unconscious for several hours until much later that evening. Honestly, took several years to process a lot of what I really learned during my near-death experience and what I really learned when I was in that beautiful light. And it was really the knowing that all is well. When we're in our bodies, the saying that all is well, it doesn't make sense to us. When we're here in our bodies, we don't have a complete picture of what's happening. We don't see all of the pieces that are going on. And when we are out of our bodies, when we're in the light, when we've transitioned out and we are stripped of ego and the limitations of our brain and the limitations of our body, we have that 360-degree perspective.
So there you are, folks. Death is not the end. I think this is quite a normal understanding for most of the people listening to this show. Interesting point there, and this is the difference between a poltergeist or an earthbound spirit. and spirit. She says she become disconnect from the external world. And so obviously she became in spirit form. But poltergeists or earthbound spirits still remain connect to the world. They don't wish to leave the world. And so that's the difference. So in many ways, the earthbound spirit remains in this three-dimensional world that we live in, this inversion of truth, this world that we live in. And this is why when she has the NDE experience and goes to that heavenly realm, which is in the fifth dimension, I mean, there's 6 and 7 and more, but it's this fifth dimension, the heavenly realms, where there is this unconditional love, expanded awareness, and so on and so forth. And this is what we can have on the earth plane. And actually, this is where we're heading on the earth plane right now, as this inverted 3D world dissolves, because more people are putting their conscious thought into higher frequencies. So we're beginning to see more of the fifth dimension on heaven and earth. So you don't have to have a near-death experience. And I wouldn't recommend a near-death experience either, to be quite honest. Most of you have out-of-the-body experiences when you're asleep at night. And I'll just touch on this briefly. You know the difference between a dream and an out-of-the-body experience, because a dream skits around all over the place, has no form, no structure. Where an out-of-the-body experience has a storyline as a beginning, middle and an end. It can be very short and it can be quite bizarre at some times, at some point. But it still has a beginning, middle and an end. And that dream is an out-of-a-body experience. So, there we are. That's it for today. We've wrapped it all up in pretty good time. So, what I would say is, once again, if you have any paranormal story, some of the spooky stuff that we show at the beginning, you have had a rebirth experience, reincarnation experience, an NDE, out of the body experience, if you've had a deathbed vision, please share it with us. Or anything, a time slip, if you've experienced a time slip, we'd love to hear from it. You can do it audio, you can do it video. Just send me a quick note, mikecavalli@hotmail.com, and we'll get this process going for you. So look, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up now. I'm going to put up the closing titles. Then immediately after the closing titles, I'm going to put up the table tipping session that I did yesterday. I did it alone without Denise yesterday because she was otherwise occupied. And you can pick this up independently of this show on YouTube a little later on. But in the meantime, we send lots of love and healing to Linda so that she can join us again next week. And I'll be back next week at the same time. And I wish you all a safe and pleasant evening and a great forthcoming weekend. This is Mike signing off. Bye-bye for now. Welcome everybody, Mike here, and on the table of course would be Jeanne d'Arc. Denise, as you can also see, is not here today. She has a prior engagement, but she'll be back next week. So the questions are all ready, not too many questions this week, but some quite complex ones actually. So we'll see how we get on with this today. Also, a question was asked if the person could see the bottom of the table legs. So, unfortunately, because of the way the camera is, the top of my head would be cut off. So, at the end of this video, I'm just going to move the camera slightly, and so you can see my hands on the table and just the bottom of the legs. I think this is going to be the only time I'm going to do this. Because I understand people would like to see what exactly is going on under here as well. Nothing untoward in that question, by the way. But at least if we do that, then we clear it all up. Okay, so let's begin and see what happens here today. Welcome, Jean. So, as you can see, she's doing the movement for stop talking and give me the first question. Okay, Jean. So, do we encounter or interact with angels on the earth plane? And the answer is yes, of course we do. And you can interact with them. Firstly, nowadays they're starting to use the digital realm to connect with us. So you might wake up in the middle of the night at 2:22 or 3:33, something like this, and their favourite number at the moment seems to be 111. So you might see this on your digital clock or go past buildings and you're drawn to the attention of door number 111, etc. So yes, the answer to that question is we do, and they are not always in the angelic form that we expect them to be. Sometimes they come in human form, and sometimes humans are used as a service to do the work of an angel. So again, this is quite a complex question. It feels simple in the way it's asked here, but actually it's quite complex. So Jean, can we consider you an ascended master? Yes. Now the question of an ascended master, okay. So what she tells me is, for the purposes of people on the earth plane, they're given titles of ascended master, angels, archangels, and so on. Okay, but as she says, we up here in the light are known by our light and our light only, and the light cannot hide and it cannot be distruthful. You are what you are. So yes, Jean could be considered as an ascended master, but in the 5th and 6th dimensions and above, they do not give themselves titles. They are known merely by their light. Okay. Was the DNA of gorillas the highest of the primates, manipulated by extraterrestrials to create humans? No. Okay. The answer is no, and this is because we are created. And that's it. And what I get is that a dog doesn't evolve and become anything else than a dog, and a gorilla doesn't evolve and become anything else than a gorilla. Okay, so we are the creation of the divine, and that's our source. So is the theory of evolution correct for the animals of the earth? No. Next question. I have read Diana Cooper's book about where animals come from, and for example, some originated from Orion and some from the Pleiades, among other places in the universe. Is this correct? Okay, thank you. So, again, a question on Putin, Ukraine and UFOs. Is Putin aware of the UFOs being seen above Ukraine? Yes, that was a strong yes. Does he have any communication with them? No. Did Saint Germain, or at least not at the moment, is that correct? And will he have? Yes, there will be communication. Did Saint Germain, keeper of the violet flame, reincarnate as St. Joseph, Shakespeare, or St. Francis of Assisi? No. So I don't know actually if this is written in popular books that he did incarnate one of them, but Jean is saying that he didn't. Okay. So, nice question. Will I be able to do teleportation, be physically here and the next moment somewhere else on the planet for a coffee break in Australia, for example? And the answer to the question is yes, you will be able to. But the next question is, are you capable right now of doing it? And the answer is no, because you really need to be in 5D consciousness and 5D awareness fully and completely in order to do this. And there are some ascended masters living on the earth plane that can do this, and there are some that are actually bilocational, which means that they can be in two places at the same time. So it is possible, and people have been doing this teleportation manifestation, if you like, for many, many years now. And I think, thank you, this is one of the dark secrets that's been kept from us, that we can actually do this. Okay. So this is a question, well, it's more of a statement here, and I'll try and break this down. I'm confused by Jeanne's answer. She said there's a better place than here. So better for whom or for what? I have to reframe the question. Is there for me a better place than here? Is the best place to be the best place where we are? And it goes on to say, I believe that any moment, any place is exactly what fits adequately to our task and energy field that we are to transform. Is this correct? That's correct. This is reference to the last part of the question, but the first part of the question is there a better place than here? So I had to ask Jeanne this beforehand because of the complexity of this, and the answer was the best place actually doesn't really matter locationally. It depends on what you feel in your heart. And if you work with heart coherence, then you create the better place no matter what location you're in. So, for example, if you are in 5D awareness, totally and wholly, which is an expression of heaven on earth, then you don't need to die to go to heaven. Right, okay. Is that correct, John? Good, okay. So yes, there are no wrong choices actually. You get through the life the best way you can with your consciousness at its time. So, final question. I heard that the US birth certificates are a form of bondage. Is this true? If so, we will be able to break free from this system. Thank you. Well, the good news is, hallelujah, this inverted world is dissolving, it is collapsing, so we are breaking free from all of this inversion. It's true. And yes, there is bondage held over your name. You are actually the person responsible for the straw man, which is the birth certificate. And I'm going to put a link to some information about birth certificates and straw men because this is one of the great inversions that is coming to an end, as will be marine law, which is what we currently operate under. So I'll put that link up, and you'll be surprised how much enslaved we actually are by all this, because if you think, for example, you own your car, you don't. The moment you registered it with the driving license authority, you become the registered owner, responsible for all debts and all fines incurred by the straw man who you actually signed on behalf of when you bought the car. So to know more about this, you need to look at information in the US on sovereign citizen, and in the UK, natural law or freeman on the land. So we can break the bondage when we say enough is enough. The frightening thing about this is, unbeknown to our parents, they actually sold us to the state when registering us with a birth certificate. And you can check this all out. But fortunately, like I said, it's all coming to an end now, thank God. So, those are the questions that we have here. So now I'm going to get up and tilt the camera. I'm not going to switch the camera off. I'm going to tilt the camera so you can see just my hands and the bottom of the table, and so you can see the bottom of the table moving. So let's see what we can do here. I'm just going to tilt this down this way so you can see the bottom of the table there. So here we are, and you can see my hands. So I think Joan will do this only once because she doesn't really like to get involved in this stuff. So as you can see, she's asking for a question, but there is really no more questions. But what I would say is, Joan, could you tilt this table and make it move on all corners of the legs? Okay, thank you. And if you could do that again, Joan, for us, that would be great. Thank you. So, okay. So there you can see the bottom of the table moving. It moves exactly how she wants it to move. Oi! That nearly fell over. So, there we are. That's it for this week. Denise will be back next week, and I look forward to your company and your questions for next week. Please have them in by Monday, the latest, so that I can prepare them, and sometimes I need to reformulate them simply so that we can get a yes-no answer, and then I can channel any other further points that's required on the question. So, okay everyone, that's it for today. Have a lovely week, and I'll be back next week with more of your questions. Bye-bye for now.